Alright, tuning in live, we have the patch 3.4 notes. It is exactly 1 p.m. on the dot. Let's dig into it. There are 33 balance changes coming out. This patch is going to be huge. They also leaked a few new cards I saw on Twitter, so there's a lot to go through. A lot to go through, so sit tight, grab a drink, and let's dive into it. Alright, new cards. We're experimenting with a new approach to the live balance. Yep, so this is what we saw. There's 3 new cards. Um, I might go into detail here. So the first card we have here is a 3-mana Shrima card. This is give an ally -2 attack this round, and then an ally and that enemy strike each other at slow speed. So this is essentially a slow speed single combat with a slight upside, being able to debuff your opponent's unit. This card isn't that good. I'll be honest. It is a sort of a downgrade to a lot of the other strike spells, especially because it is a slow speed strike spell. Now, it is a Shrima card, but a lot of these sort of strike spell decks are like, the Shrima Demacia, the Sivir Auction, things like that, that already have access to all the Demacia strike spells. Now, if you need a deck that needs a strike spell, but isn't able to play Demacia, I suppose this card could be okay. I see synergy with it for like Nasus or Renekton, but overall, I don't think this card is super powerful. It can slot into like some other niche decks, might propel some other champions, but in the current state of things, I don't really see this being played that much. I'm not gonna watch the video. Celestial Wonder, Target card, 5 mana fast stun 2 enemies. This is also an interesting one. Now as your fellow resident Yasuo player, I don't know if this fits into Yasuo Leona. It's sort of like a side grade to Concussive Palm, where if you play them at slow speed, so if you like stun pre-combat, not that you really would with this card, but Concussive Palm being stun pre-combat is basically like a 2-for-1 as well. In situations where you're trying to beat swarm decks, these cards just aren't even that good regardless. There are just some niche situations where your opponent has 2 big units, and you're able to cast this card for maximum value. This card is also basically like a slight upgrade to Crescent Strike as well, so you can think of it as similar boats. And maybe you can have better forks if you have both the invoke cards for the Crescent Strike as well as having Celestial Wonder in your deck. But for synergy to like a Yasuo deck, probably not as high. Just a good fast speed response in a region that has no other fast speed cards, probably pretty decent, not gonna lie. This gives a little bit more life to the slower invoke cards, the invoke decks rather, like Asol or the Star Shaping decks. Maybe can slot in. I'm not super sold on it, but maybe. Targeting is great at creating large single threats, but can struggle with wider boards. Right. It's interesting. Like the reason why they created this card is because they want to cover like one of Targon's weaknesses, and they gave them a fast speed response card, which seems kind of odd to me. It just seems not really into what Targon wants to be doing. I mean, it suits Targon's game plan very well, but it doesn't really fit thematically with what I perceive Targon to be doing. But it's interesting. And then lastly, we have Rocket Barrage. This is a 5-mana PNZ spell. It says deal 3 to an enemy and 1 to all other enemies. So this is like a... I don't know how to compare this card. So this is like a Withering Wail with an added bonus. I think the card closely resembles to like what Event Horizon does, where it stuns one enemy and then stuns like, the smaller ones. And it does something very similar to that, right? It deals 3 to a big unit and then 1 to the rest. It is a oh, it goes face as well, potentially. So like, this could just deal 4 damage to face, right? Deal 3 to 1. I guess it only deals 3 to face. But a direct damage is meant to be the strength, yep, while others, the AoE, Yeah, so it just seems that they're plugging up some holes that used to exist within some of these regions. Like they're just giving each region a little bit of extra support for areas that they're weak in, which is interesting. I don't really know how to think of it. But 5 mana point is just really awkward. I don't really perceive this card to be played that much. Because if you're looking for pings, of course, you just go to like Shadow Isles. You have the PNZ Shadow Isles decks. I just don't know where this card would kind of slot in. Again, these are weaknesses that you could combine with other regions that share the same weakness, and now you have a little bit of comeback to it. But those decks are often more fringe, maybe more fun, more casual, just holding up some of the weaknesses. They could play in a little bit more casual decks that aren't super serious about how they want to build their decks. Is an interesting sort of direction that they're aiming these new cards for, which I don't mind at all, right? It's nice having these like filler cards that hold up a little bit of the region's weakness, although not necessarily meant to be played competitively. So that's kind of interesting. You can see here that they're using against this board of spiders, which is pretty good. Card updates. Oh my lord, Aphelios isn't changing directly, but oh my god. Oh, okay. Hold on. Yodon arms. What is it? A few cards are not updated yet. We want to provide extra context, so they're not updating these cards. Yodon arms. Wasn't seeing enough nearly as much play. Well, it's changed for locked. So the way these patches work is that they have to lock them 2 weeks in advance. And so when they were locking these in, they saw that Yodon arms wasn't that prevalent, and then all of a sudden the weeks that after it was locked in, it really exploded, right? Battle tree, something similar, like it's not that this deck and card is super prevalent, but just the general like play, like the feeling of playing against a Yoron Arms deck and Battle Tree deck are both relatively poor. But it's interesting that they're aware of this, which is good. It's just that when they made these changes, these just weren't on their priority. But this is where things get interesting. Aphelios. So nothing changed to Aphelios. At least this part is fine. Gifts from Beyond going back to 2. All moon weapons back down to 2. Woo! Let's go! Aphelios? Back to 2. Oh my god, that's so insane. That's so cool. Oh, I love to see this back. I'm so excited to play Aphelios when the patch goes live. That's gonna be the biggest thing that I want to do. So Crescendo, what they changed is, so like the biggest issue with, I think, at least that a lot of people had with Aphelios, was just Crescendum. And even outside of Aphelios decks, Crescendum just having a 2 conditional thing that just really did a lot for your deck, being able to like pull out a 2-cost Swaller from your deck and just not only thin your deck but also just tutor it out was really powerful. Nice spelling error. Crescendo presented a balance problem at a reasonable cost. Yep. So now they made it a summon a 2-cost Swaller from your regions, which is interesting because now like what's funny is now you don't have to build your deck or surrounding a 2-drop, which is probably sometimes a buff to Aphelios. Like some of the issues with playing Aphelios decks was you didn't want to pull out a 2-cost, like say you're running Conchologist in your deck, you didn't want to pull out Conchologist because that's a play effect and not a summon effect. Likely like a card like Loping Telescope, Mountain Goat, things like that. Mountain Goat's fine because like, it's just a unit, but you didn't want to be building your deck around 2-cost units that had play effects because you wouldn't get them during the summon. But now you don't need to do that. But instead you get a random 2-cost Faller from your deck. So now instead of looking into your deck and pulling it out, you no longer thin your deck. What's really funny is this still leads to the same like high roll aggravations. Like a lot of decks build around this certain 2-cost unit in the regions that you can pull out your deck, and that's really powerful. So Eye of the Dragon, Broadwing, Petrified Broadwing. You still can pull these decks, but now maybe you just like it's like a 1 in like 10 to pull it, and the 1 in 10 times it still feels it probably feels even more aggravating, which is really funny. Like they've reduced the overall power level of this card, but they made the high roll of this card the same. Um, so like in a very situational place, you still pull out a Petricide Broadwing, or you summon a Petricide Broadwing, you summon an Eye of the Dragon. But now, the chance is obviously very low, right? So just like weirdly high rolly, very weirdly high rolly actually. I don't know how to think of it, but it does open up Aphelios and like the 2-drop slots to have a little bit more build around, which is nice. Azir. Ooh, I did see this. Somebody did say this in my chat. But Azir now counts landmarks as well. So this is a direct buff to Mono Shrima. I guess Azir Relic as well, being able to summon the Deus. But more so Mono Shrima that plays Azir and Xerath. So this does hugely speed up Azir's level up, which is one of the things that held back how quickly Mono Shrima actually pulled off their strategy. So now on turn 1, you pull a Sun Disc from your deck for free. You already gain 1 proc for Azir. Rolling Sands, 2 procs for Azir. This is huge. This is really huge. And I think they notice that as well, right? Especially in Shrima only strategies. This is a straight up buffed Mono Shrima. I think Mono Shrima has like a pretty good chance of being actually good, like borderline competitive with this change. But it definitely depends. So Gnar base stats reduced to a 3/3, to a 5/5, but keeps the keywords, sure. I never thought that Gnar's attack was like the biggest issue. Like that was never like the biggest thing, right? So I think this change overall is relatively a miss. Not that I think like Gnar overall was like a huge problem either, but I think a lot of people were expecting this quick attack to just go away. But you know, just like dealing a little bit less damage, sort of like the Scion thing. I guess it's okay. But unlike Scion, this didn't like close games by itself, being in regions that were generally locked away from being able to burn your face afterwards either. But it seems interesting. I don't think this change needed a huge nerf anyways. So like, and you know, just like a slight tweak is totally fine. Pantheon reducing one attack. Okay, sure. And same thing like this. I don't know. Like the attack was never the issue, right? Like it already had faded, so this one of stat line difference is like no difference at all. Now if it was like a 2/2 and couldn't block fearsomes when you played it, then you know that's a different story. But overall, like this doesn't solve what people found frustrating in Pantheon, right? Like maybe like you could take out Overwhelm, and then if you don't roll Overwhelm here, then you don't close the game out as fast. Or if you do roll Overwhelm, that's one less roll for like Elusive or Scout. And then if you want to guarantee to not get Overwhelm, you have to play a Zenith Blade on it. But overall, I just don't think that this is the right direction. And it's a very minor change, but I think Pantheon overall probably needed a slightly more relevant change. But you know, just like light shoulder tap is fine here and there, I suppose. Not really what I was looking forward for Pantheon change, but it's really interesting that they're hitting a lot of champions overall this time around. I was expecting a lot more of that to come in April, but it's cool that they're at least touching up on these. Pike. Whoa, they did nerf Pike. That's so bizarre. I don't get it. I don't know, man. Lurkers have been a consistent force for a good, yeah, sure, and while they aren't completely think that taken, I don't get it. This makes no sense. I don't get it. But Dune Break, okay. So they're changing other cards in Lurk too, so interesting to see what happens there. Horrible has been success. Yep. Yep. We're giving several of the weaker mechs a tune. I've seen. Holy moly. Whoa. This is a rework. This is like a small change, but this is a full-on rework. I've seen oh my god. This is a huge rework and probably a huge nerf unless like the Mecha Yoros itself are super powerful now. But Rumble, I've seen allied Mecha Yoros deal 12 plus. Oh god, that's so insane. So I know a lot of us were talking about, and if you watched my past video on what I thought about what champions did, like reworks and things like that, I mentioned how Rumble felt weird, how he wasn't really tied to his Mech Yoro packages at all. And now, wow, how Rumble got destroyed here. So Little Dipper, sure. Like these are minor, right? These are so hard to get out. Like, yeah, these don't matter. Like, you don't change the issue, which is you have to play bad cards in order to get these cards. And these cards are already good. Like, oh my god, Rumble got absolutely gutted here. So insane. I did not see this coming at all. Like these changes are so irrelevant because you still have to play the 2-mana 1/1 that gets you like a early drop. You have to play like the 3-mana 3/2 tough that discards a card to get you one of these. And now Rumble's level up condition is like completely locked to Mechiorals. Wow. I disagree with this one. I think this is too big of a nerf to Rumble. They should have changed the cards that generate Mecha Yoros, not just the Mecha Yoros themselves. So I think this hit again is a huge miss. Very bizarre. I don't understand why they went for this one. Victor, Hex Core, token cost. Okay, so now the Hex Core upgrades cost 0. That's cool. So that's free now. Victor gets a free keyword every turn. It works towards level up. That's fine. I talked about Victor a little bit as well. I think that they could have done a little bit more to Victor that could have made him slightly more interesting rather than just being this sort of like I stat on a keyword every turn. Being able to choose the keyword, being able to have a different pool of keywords like the lucky finds. Those are all interesting kind of suggestions, but this one's just a little bit plain overall. Straight up buff to Victor, I suppose, but just a very slight one in that matter. What? What? I don't get it. What was Lurk doing that needs nerfs? I don't understand. I'm so confused. I don't get it. Allizer 2-2, I think a lot of people were expecting this. Vanguard Sergeant back to 3. Wow. Ooh. Vanguard Sergeant was one of the strongest cards, I think, going in after the buff. Because for Demacia was just so good, in scouts, in any like battle city with Demacia, the ability to swarm and then play for Demacia was so powerful, and the stat line just really helped the trade, right? I think, to some of us, this isn't much of a surprise. To me, I was like, yeah, I could go down to 3-3, but I didn't expect them to revert on their change so quickly. So I don't know if it's still like it was unplayable beforehand, but that might be a function of the fact that nobody really bothered to experiment with it. Because I think the value of still generating a Fort Demacia is still so powerful that this card might still be good. Like people might still play this card wherever it needs to be played. But the fact that it is a 3-3 just makes it a little bit hard to trade and easier to attack into, which is good. But the card, back to 3-3. Oncologist, 2-1, Telescope, 3 cost, whew, and a 2-2. 2-1 Conchologist. Yep. But 3 mana Telescope. Oh man. I think Oncologist is fine. The 2-1 is probably better than a 1-2. It's like the Shadow Assassin treatment, right? I think if Conchologist was a 1-2, it'd probably be a little bit too weak. At least having a 2-attack stat line lets it at least block into like aggro decks, which is good. But the Telescope becoming a 3-mana 2-2, whew. I don't know if you're able to realistically. Oh, that's so expensive to play Telescope. It's kind of like a Solari Priestess now. So if you're running Targon, you have to like as a 3-drop slop, you have Solari Priestess as well as Sloping Telescope, and I think that's a little bit oversaturated. Whereas now if you're playing like a Bandle deck, you're playing like Tree, you're still kind of forced to play this card. And this card still does powerful things. 3 mana is like big deal. But that's whew. Overall, like I'm happy, me personally, that they didn't change what these cards did, because me as a Hearthstone player coming to Runeterra, I personally really enjoyed how this manifest mechanic really worked. It's always a mechanic that I enjoyed a lot, and especially Conchologist, right? The ability to have a very limited pool of cards to choose from is really, really cool. Telescope as well, having a little bit of a fun aspect tied to it as well, is just really awesome and sweet. But at 3 mana, it's definitely pushing the boundaries of what decks can actually afford to run it or not. Yeah, I agree. Paddle Star, deal 5. Huh. Interesting. Ooh, if you're asking me what cards are getting touched this expand patch, I was not gonna say Paddle Star. Paddle Star, like, falls into the same category of the 3 mana deal 4s. So this dealing 5 is interesting. It's just like a little bit of a shift that, away from the pre-existing like bucket of cards. Now if they touch Black Spear and Ravenous Flock, maybe that'd be interesting. But Paddle Spear, huh, curious. Quicksand, oh my god, holy moly, wow. Quicksand can so Quicksand remains the same, but now you have the option to choose to do this to 2 enemies. Holy moly, this is such a huge card. Wow. This is like it's like you can disable like elusive, lifesteal, tough, overwhelm, whatever it may be. That's so big. This is like a moonlight affliction on a stick, like a defensive moonlight. That's so big. What the hell? Oh my god, this is such a huge buff. Quicksand was potentially a potent answer to enemies with strong keywords, but its single target focus often lost it. But like this card is already pretty decent, but now it's so insane. Wow. I think Quicksand is like Mono Shrima, guys. Mono Shrima is a huge winner. Like Quicksand, Azir, wow. So insane. Oh my god. I did not expect this at all. Like these are cards that are like already decent and now you're just pushing them into the spotlight, which is really cool, honestly. She Who Wanders. Obliterate all units with 4 or less power in play in hands. Obliterate all or less in play and in what? Am I am I blind? Is there a typo? When what She Who Wins was dominating LOR and since was restricted to hit followers. She has mostly wandered out of people's decks. Wait, this is so mind trippy. Hang on. Oh, all units now hits champions. Oh my lord, this this is funny. Props to the LR team. What we've all come along the way since She Who Wins was dominating LR, and since she was restricted to only hit followers, she has mostly wandered out of people's decks. This is like high level humor. This is so good. I'm happy that they're still like they're very sort of casual about weaving this stuff in. The jokes about like the misspelling and things like that. I'm really happy that they're at least taking like this very humorous approach to how they write out some of these. The people who make these like descriptions are like top level like comedies, comedians. We want her to be a top rate finisher, letting her disrupt the opposing gameplay more effectively, gave her more roles as a late game option. Now this actually obliterates champions as well, so this is kind of cool. Definitely a huge buff. This card is already super annoying in some like decks, but this is kind of cool. I'm not gonna lie. Might play some Peak with this deck. This is actually a really relevant change. Whoa. Okay. Sure. So like Alpha Wildclaw stat line that does something really powerful. Does Bilgewater need this kind of card? I don't know. Like it's hard. I don't like what kind of mid-range Bilgewater deck are you building that would run this card? I'm not sure. But cool change. Good on you. Oh my god, they actually wow. They're hitting everything. Wait, what? Given ally. Okay, so they chucked off one attack buff from Sharpsight, which is huge. Like now Sharpsight is much less of an offensive combat trick, and now almost a purely defensive combat trick. Either like saving your unit or blocking elusive, which is huge because like when you're attacking in with like a quick attacker and now you can't really like buff your unit to trade up against like an opposing combat trick is so big. I don't know. Like this is a huge change overall. I think a lot of people maybe saw it coming, but I think a lot of people saw this coming more, which is Twin Disciplines. Now it only gives an ally +2 attack or +3, which I think is quite healthy. So this definitely like caps off Lee Sin's power level a little bit, but it keeps its defensive capabilities. Now, to be fair, I think its defensive capabilities were probably much stronger than its offensive capabilities, and I'm surprised that this didn't get switched around the other way to be 3 attack and only +2 health, especially given the Sharpsight nerf where now you can use this even less offensively. Like you still have no counter to the mana level of Twin Disciplines being able to grant 3 attack or 3 health in a trick, which is bizarre. Because like I thought that you would reverse these rather than the other way around. I think Twin is overall like a weirdly. This is like a miss. This is maybe fine, but this is a miss. Like this should be swapped around, right? Like the defensive capabilities of Twin Discipline was much more powerful than the offensive capabilities. So I'm not quite sure why they did this change this way. I think this sort of explanation is like, fair enough. Whoa. Alright, sure. Fair enough. Added to attack. Shattered banner. Effect is no longer consumed by units that already have challenger. Sure. I mean that makes sense. This should have made sense. Like this already work. You can't vulnerable the same unit with like the rolling sands, so having Tattered Banner do that was quite bizarre. Sacred Protector. Give an ally barrier. Okay, so now this is a bigger Bright Steel Protector, right? So now it has the added bonus of giving an ally barrier. So that's cool. Sure. So I mean, like you can use this on an offensive turn, and then you have a unit with double attack, right? Whoa, wait, that's so insane. Like, what if you played like imagine you just have like an overall unit on board, and then you don't have a Shen, but you just play Sacred Protector. You're protecting one unit and giving it double attack, while also having an 8/6. Like, this is kind of nuts. Isn't this already just like a win con by itself? Like, this reminds me of something that like Ledros does, right? It applies pressure and it applies like a big statted unit. So now you're forking the opponent into having to deal with your barrier double attack unit while also having an 8/6 on board. That seems kind of cool. I like this one. This is actually really sick. Sigil Malice down to 3, interesting. Um, we can afford to be a little less embarrassing. Oh my god, people are savage with this one, man. I mean, like, these are cool changes overall, right? Just like touching up the weak cards, which is what I think, like, when it comes to balance match, I like these changes, right? Like, there's maybe like a handful of changes to the actual, like, big relevant meta cards, but a lot of changes to some of the less underplayed cards. You know, like Sacred Protector, King Jarvan the Third, and Sigil of Malice. These are all really cool, right? I really like the direction of these changes a lot, and hopefully, like, you know, balance patches going forward does this as well. Calculated creations give them +1/+1. So in the past, calculated creations only gave the unit but didn't give the buff. Sure, I don't think this card is any much better, but it's kind of cool. Flash Bomb Trap. Ooh, what are they doing here? Cards that previously played. Oh, okay, so overall, so when you shuffle Flash Bomb Traps into your deck, it's to the top 10 cards, and now it's to the top 8 cards. Okay, so this is a pretty interesting buff. It just makes it more consistent, as they said here. It allows you to find your traps a little bit more quickly, so that's cool. Overall, a little bit of a buff. Again, I don't think the issue with Flash Bombs is the fact that it was on the top 10 instead of the top 8. I think it was the support cards were just like really bad, right? Sting Officer, just a bad card. The only good card was maybe the Justice Rider, which was a 3/4 mana 3/4. But like everything else was just sort of poor. And I think that, you know, this small change does buff the archetype a little bit more. But I don't I don't like that's not really the direction that I thought, you know, they could go. But, you know, like releasing new cards itself is probably limited to different things. So in the future, I could see them releasing more support cards for the Flash Bomb archetype, and this buff will come in much more handy and relevant there. But of course, like, you know, they're pointing out that these changes are also very relevant in Path of Champions, which I can see something pretty relevant in for at least the majority of the player base. Careful Prep to 2 mana. Wow. So, to any of you who are unfamiliar with Careful Prep does, it places a card from your hand into your deck, and then predict and then create an exact copy of your chosen card in hand. So it's like a 2-for-1, right? So you shuffle a card back into your deck, you predict a card, and then you draw that card, and then you draw that card again next turn. That's cool. I think this card was like super interesting. Like it definitely made for some really interesting things. Like you could play this in Lurk, or at least I was trying it in Lurk, where you like put a Rek'Sai into your deck, and then you predict Rek'Sai, and then you put another copy of Rek'Sai in your hand, and then you draw the Rek'Sai, and then you can like call the pack, and it does all these like interesting things, which I think this card is super neat. Being at 2 mana is really interesting. Now I think Kato saw this on Twitter and was like, "Oh, this is a cool Shellfolk buff for Shreema," and I do agree. It seems really powerful to just have another way of having this sort of effect. When now if you play this with a Shellfolk, you get 2 copies of the predicted card, which is kind of cute. But overall, like very interesting. Cam for the Doubt. Oh yes, thank you. Please change what this card does. So slight buff in stat line, which is cool. When I'm summoned, if you target, and they've made the condition slightly easier. So now instead of targeting 6+ allies, you only need +4 cost target allies. So now this card, you know, activates before Pantheon is leveled. 6 mana, 6/5 Overwhelm Spell Shield Challenger. I still think this card is doo doo. Um, it's so conditional. Yeah, you could play this on turn 6 and then have a level Pantheon on turn 7. No faded, no scaling, no quick attack. It's just like remove on a stick, right? Like it's unit. It's like vengeance on a unit, and you don't get to utilize like the mana, and you need to have your attack token. So yeah, this is still probably not that great. Is that all the changes to the cards? Some UX update. Interesting. Excess health pre-visualization. Wait, this seems really interesting. I'm gonna play the video. Hopefully it's not too loud. Because UX updates, I think, in this game are super, like... Whoa! So you can see that you're dealing 2 damage here. I think UX updates in this game are super quality of life. Oh! Oh my god, that's so cool. Now what's this? Oh, it's the... Oh, because now you see the units dying? Whoa! Oh my god. And now you can see that this unit's dying? Oh! And now you're healing. Oh my god. You guys see this? This is so huge. This is such a huge quality of life update. Wow. That's such a huge quality of life update. That's so cool. I love that so much. I love this kind of stuff for Runeterra. Because as the game progresses and gets more complicated, there's so many more things I have to keep in mind. And so having this sort of thing to like, tell you what is going on without necessarily needing to check the eye, you can just see it straight away. Like, you process more information a little bit quicker, and then you can still use the eye, which is really cool. I love this thing. It's so cool. New skins. Infernal Shen. Shen was a really cool Infernal skin. So they made Shen the epic one. Infernal Cannon, I believe. Oh my god, the mark looks insane though. Infernal Pantheon. Oh, that's so sick. These Infernal skins are great. Infernal Galio, sure. Oh my god. What? Dude, this Infernal Swain is popping off. Holy frick. Infernal Board. Infernal Poro. Infernal Gloomtooth. Yup, yup, yup. This Infernal pack looks absolutely sick. Some bug fixes, yada yada. Fix few crashes, blah blah blah, blah blah blah, blah blah blah. Oh, they finally updated the tournament tab. Woo! Okay, overall, just the changes though. I think the changes are really cool. Now we do have to keep in mind that this patch was locked in a little bit earlier, but they hit Catalyzer, they hit Sergeant, they hit Conchologist Sloping Telescope, they have their eyes on Yodel Arms, they have their eyes on Vandal Tree, they rebuffed Aphelios, which I'm super hyped about, Azir, Monoshima, overall huge buff across the board, Gnar, slight tap on the wrist, Pantheon, slight tap on the wrist, nerf to Lurk, I don't quite understand, but Rumble getting butchered, I don't quite understand. A slight buff to Victor. Overall, like, Quicksand, one of the biggest changes I think to this patch in just relative impact to how playable the card is now, because this card is now insane. Shield Wander is also a big change, some minor. Huge change to Mossy. This is such a huge deal, being able to not grant 2 attack. Twin, I think overall a miss. And then just some buffs to some relatively underplayed cards. The patch is cool. Patch is definitely cool. I don't think it shakes up decks nearly as much. I think Yodon Arms is going to stomp around until the next patch hits, which is unfortunate. And I don't think there's really anything you can do about it until they actually decide to nerf Yodon Arms. The only solace there is that the Yodon Arms decks are a little bit slower. The Conchologist having a 1 health stat line, the Loping Telescope costing 3. They do have to find different cards to play. Or like if they don't, then their decks are gonna be a little bit slower overall. But overall, relatively happy with how the things went. I think just the miss of like Yodon Arms is probably gonna be the biggest thing that we're gonna be noticing a lot of in the coming weeks. Maybe even leading up to seasonals. So I think Yodon Arms is definitely gonna need some change. Hopefully soon enough that we're not just completely sick of this card when it comes out. Because like the PNZ stuff like the Flame Chompers, the discard, things like that, the 6Y, the Jordan Arms. Grandfather Fae, still very, very annoying cards as overall archetype. The Jordan Arms is probably going to be the strongest. I see this as being one of the strongest decks going into the patch. So I'm quite annoyed by that because I think the Aphelios changes is cool and all. Like I'd love to play Aphelios, but I think you still get slapped by Yordle arms, which is definitely quite demoralizing. I'm really happy to play some more Mono Shrima now that Azir got this buff, because I think this is huge, along with the Quicksand change. So overall, that's just the general thoughts of the patch. Hope you guys enjoyed. I know I put out a little bit of a fun teaser video for you guys, so I hope you guys enjoyed that as well. But thank you guys for tuning in to the channel. Really appreciate it. Glad to be back. I have some really exciting things that I want to try out when the expansion hits. Very sad that they hit Lurk. I don't understand why, but that's gonna be another issue somewhere down the line. But I hope you guys enjoyed. Please let me know what you guys think of the patch as well down below in the comments, and we can have a little bit more of a discussion there. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'll catch you guys tomorrow, and peace out, guys. Take care.